Good afternoon, or good morning, actually. Thank you for joining us today. For those that are on the line and those that weren't able to join us, we're going to record today's session. Specifically, what we're going to talk about today is that within ETDM, specifically the environmental screening tool and other parts of the tool that use it, so think of things like area of interest. For a long time, we've been using the element occurrence layers that come out of FNAI Florida Natural Areas Inventory. And over the last several years, they've changed how they organize that data, how they store it spatially, how you visually see it within a GIS system. And so with some of those changes, we just thought as we're rolling out the newer layers that looked and act a little differently than what you guys have seen in the past, we wanted to do a quick webinar to just give you an overview of things. Today, we're joined by Erica Christensen. She's a wildlife species expert in our office, and she's very familiar with FNAI. And I'm going to turn it over to her to give this presentation. And like I said, we're recording the session, so we'll put it up on our website and we'll make it available to folks. We'll send you out a link. You can share it with folks. And if you have any questions, you can follow up with us during the webinar and after as well. Thanks, Erica.
Good morning, everyone. This is Erica Christensen. Like Pete said, I'm going to go over the changes to the FNAI Element Occurrence layers in the EST. If anyone has questions, feel free to use the chat box. So originally, this presentation was going to be part of the statewide ETAP meeting, but we felt, based on the delay due to Hurricane Michael, that we would give this presentation a little earlier since this has already been rolled out into the EST. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, I'm going to give a little introduction about what is FNAI and the element occurrence layers. So FNAI stands for the Florida Natural Areas Inventory, which is a nonprofit organization administered by Florida State University that is dedicated to gathering, interpreting, and disseminating information critical to the conservation of Florida's biological diversity. FNAI builds and maintains a comprehensive database of the biological resources of Florida, which include more than 32,000 element occurrences of rare plants, animals, and high-quality natural communities. An element occurrence documents the area of current or former presence of an element of biodiversity, and that element can be described as a species or a subspecies, natural community, or some other important natural feature. Generally, an EO is considered to have conservation value in a practical sense. And just as a general reminder, EO polygons do not map potential habitat. So an EO should have practical conservation value for the element as evidenced by potential continued or historical presence and or regular recurrence of the given location. And it's more than just a casual observation, such as a bird flying over. So to demonstrate the changes, this slide is demonstrating what the old data layer looked like in the EST. And so in ETDM, the old version of the data layer displayed occurrence data as points across the region. The different colors corresponded to their listing status, like federally endangered or state threatened, something like that. And in this version, there was no description or categorization of the likelihood of occurrence from these data points. They only generally inform the user that at some point, in other words, the date of observation, the element was observed. And so the old version of the data layer was named FNAI Species Occurrences. So the changes, the new layers, are going to be in this FNAI folder that it's titled, and it can be found under the Wildlife and Habitat Base Map, under the Habitat folder, and the Occurrence Data subfolder. And you'll see these three layers titled FNAI Documented Element Occurrence, FNAI Likely Element Occurrence, and FNAI Potential Element Occurrence. And what's reflected in these new changes are: 1, categorization of occurrence data based on its likelihood to occur, and 2, data is now displayed as polygons instead of points. So these next few slides is demonstrating what these layers are going to look like in the EST, and we're going to be looking at the same regional area surrounding Tallahassee. So this first layer that I highlighted is the FNAI Documented Element Occurrence. And this layer is showing the documented occurrences where there's a high likelihood that the element occurs in this area. As you can see, there's lots of points shown in this area southwest of Tallahassee, which is the Apalachicola National Forest. So it makes sense that there's a lot of documented observations of element occurrences there. This next slide is demonstrating the FNAI Likely Element Occurrence. And generally in this area, there are a few of those points. And next, we're talking about the FNAI Potential Occurrences, which shows that there's some possibility of occurrence, but there's a high margin of reasonable doubt that the species or whichever element actually occurs there. And we'll talk about this reasonable doubt in the future slides upcoming. So if we're going to go over to the legend, you can see that the different colors, similar to the old version, correspond with the listing status. Color is not an indication of density. So next I'm going to discuss what the different shapes mean and represent for this occurrence data. The EO polygons can vary widely in size. So large element occurrences can either reflect an occurrence that covers a species that has a large area, such as a wide-ranging species like a Florida black bear, or an occurrence could indicate a high locational uncertainty. So recall that an element occurrence is documentation of an occurrence, either current or past. However, the origin of some of this data may be more reliable or precise than others. For example, some of this may have been data from museum records or personal journals of naturalists, which could have a high uncertainty or unlikelihood of being accurate, while others may be more accurate geolocation data points taken with a GPS. With each of these element occurrences, there's some range of location uncertainty, which is accounted for in this data by creating a buffer around the point. This buffer only accounts for uncertainty, and it doesn't have any weight to potential habitat. In addition to these data sources, another reason for this buffer could include large ranges of area where a species may occur. For example, black bear has a large home range and may occur over a large geographic region. Looking at the graphic on the right, you can see that the circle demonstrates the observed field point observation with a high uncertainty buffer spread equidistant from the point of observation. Alternatively, the shape on the right could be showing a body of water, for example, where a species is known to exist, and there is little uncertainty of occurrence because it is known that the species occurs in that water body and not outside of it. So generally, more defined polygons will likely have higher certainty than that a species will occur there, whereas circles encompass some sort of buffer, and this uncertainty buffer can vary. The other important thing to consider is representational accuracy. So representational accuracy is an estimate of the proportion or percentage of the polygon that is actually occupied by the observed feature. It is not a measure of density, it is a measure of spatial accuracy. So a way to figure out how much of a shape is a buffer versus an observed area is to look at the representational accuracy percentage in the metadata. And so kind of just a different illustration to slightly contradict what I said earlier about circles being generalized areas. The way to check how much of this is a generalization is to look at the representational accuracy in the metadata. Here we have two polygons of the same shape and size, but one has low representational accuracy, meaning a small portion of the polygon is actually occupied, whereas the other has a high representational accuracy, with the majority of the polygon being occupied versus just being a buffer. So in this graphic, the gray area is the buffer. So you see on the left, it's a really large buffer because there's a lot of uncertainty about where the location could be. versus the other shape has a small gray area indicating a small buffer, and most of the polygon is actually occupied. These two descriptors can be defined in the following measurements. Locational uncertainty is categorized into 5 categories that describe the proximity of accuracy of the data point. These factors are not on a sliding scale, and so these different categories are negligible within 4.5 meters of the true location in any direction. So generally this is used when it's a GPS point. It could be linear, so within 4.5 meters of the true location along the line. Aerial delimited, meaning greater than 4.5 meters in any direction and within defined boundaries, such as a road, a river, or a county border. Aerial estimated is again greater than 4.5 meters in any direction and within an expert-defined buffer distance. And compound is multi-source element occurrences with varying locational uncertainty. So that could be, for example, if you have a museum record, but you also have a naturalist has been out in that area and has confirmed it, so you're going to have multiple sources of that data point. Representational accuracy, on the other hand, is described into these 5 categories of percentages, and so very high is considered over 95% accuracy, high is categorized between 80 and 95%, medium 20 to 80%, and low is less than 20%, and very low is less than 5%. And so these were separated out into those 3 data layers. So when you see the names of the data layers, documented, likely, and potential, these were separated out based on that representational accuracy. So when you're looking at the documented element occurrence layer, you know that that representational accuracy is greater than 80%, versus potential, you know that that's going to be less than 20%. So you're already going to have some understanding of how accurate that data is based on which layer you're using. So what does this all mean in practice? So we're going to look at an imaginary example north of Tallahassee near the Florida-Georgia line. Let's say we're looking at a planning study to add a 6-mile multi-use trail along the County Road 12 near Lake Ammonia. Looking at the polygons, you can see that many overlap. So how do we distinguish what these polygons mean? To get information using the map viewer, you can use the identify tool. Here I'm only looking at the documented element occurrence layer, and I'm previewing the data in table form. Note, for the purposes of this demonstration, I only had 1 out of the 3 FNAI layers selected, but the same tool can be used with all of them selected. You just have to change the identify location to all visible layers. So here you can see from my selection that it identified the overlapping polygons. Under the common name, you can see that the polygons represent the occurrence data points for red-cockaded woodpeckers and gopher tortoises, which isn't surprising because if you're familiar with this area, this is right around the Tall Timbers Research Station. Other informative data can be found in this table, such as the representational accuracy and the locational uncertainty, and it also gives the element occurrence size. Here we can see for both red-cockaded woodpeckers and gopher tortoises, there's a high representational accuracy for both species, meaning that most of the polygon is proportionally occupied in accordance to these percentages. The size of the polygon can be used to quantify what that proportion is. So for gopher tortoises, over 95% of the 1,325 acres is considered occupied, or over 1,258 acres total. For locational uncertainty, negligible indicates that the accuracy is within 4.5 meters, so this is considered GPS quality data. Ultimately, this information shows that these specific polygons have high accuracy and likelihood, which we somewhat already understood by using the documented element occurrence layer. Alternatively, if the representational accuracy was low, then there would be a small proportion of the polygon where the occupation may occur. Alternatively, you can run the GIS Analysis Report for the study area under Threatened and Endangered Species, and the report will be lumped into 2 categories, either documented or likely. or potential. So here you can see that the category is lumped together, these documented or likely data points, and in a different page it would show the potential points under a different category. Just as a side note, this report came from a different project, so it's not the same area that we're looking at near County Road 12. That's why you didn't see a bunch of these data points on the map. So in this report, you'll see a column showing the occurrence likelihood, which is based on that representational accuracy. Although this is a great way to see all the data for your study area, it does not display the actual percentage of representational accuracy or locational uncertainty. But remember that you could infer generally what the representational accuracy is based on which layer you're using. So again, documented is going to have that high or very high. Likely is some range of potential or some range of representational accuracy in the middle, and potential is going to have very low representational accuracy. So however, a new feature in the report is this summary that shows the percentage of the study area that is occupied by element occurrence polygons. This percentage is not the same as the proportion of polygons occupied that we demonstrated previously. The old data layer in the GIS report would only give a count of the number of occurrences, which is not very informative to how environmentally sensitive your study area may be, whereas this summary will tell you what percentage of your APE may be considered an environmentally sensitive area. So I know that was pretty quick, and we're just going to summarize quickly what we went over. So the FNAI element occurrences will be represented in polygons and not point data, and the data will be divided into 3 data layers: documented, likely, or potential, and it will help ETDM users be more informed about the occurrence data in their project areas. Using the Identify tool and the EST map can inform users about the reliability and accuracy of a polygon, and the GIS analysis reports will now provide a proportion of a project area that is occupied by FNAI polygons, split into those categories. Here are just a couple references that I used to put this PowerPoint together, and I also want to say a special thanks to Lex Thomas from the GeoPlan Center at UF for helping me come up with this presentation. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box now, or if you want to email me or call me separately, here's my contact information. Thank you.
Great. Let's see if we've got any. Yeah, I'm not seeing any at the moment.
Okay, well, if you guys have any questions separately, feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you guys for joining in today.
Yes, and thank you, Erica. That was a great presentation. We'll send out an email with a location where this can be viewed and looked at later when you guys are actually using this data. It'll be a great resource for you. Again, thanks, Erica, and you all have a great day. Bye.